Okay, so some of my doll sewing friends were talking about how they would like to learn how to use a rolled hem foot and how to use a ruffler, so I thought I would volunteer to make this video to show you how I use the narrow rolled hem foot and the ruffler to make a quick doll skirt. Now there are tons of tutorials and blogs and videos to show you and tell you how to use a rolled hem foot and how to use a ruffler. But again, this one is the specific niche of doll sewing. So I will show you how I specifically use the rolled hem foot and the ruffler. So let's sew some doll clothes. Hello, Chip Chip. You're in my way. Okay, so the first thing you will need to do is take your stitch length and make it as long as possible, and then take your tension and crank it up a few notches too. You might not have to do the tension thing, but I have to with my machine. So, next thing you need to do is put on the rolled hem foot. If you're not used to changing the foot on your sewing machine, this could feel awkward, but I have been doing this for so long that I can easily do this with my left hand, even though I'm not left-handed. Sewing makes you ambidextrous. Alright, here is the cloth I have chosen for this demonstration skirt. A lot of tutorials for using the rolled hem foot will tell you that this thing will only work with the lightest weight fabric. And this is quilting cotton. This is regular calico. I use this all the time with no problem. So this is the front of my fabric, and that's the top, and that's the bottom. So the bottom is what you are going to roll the hem into. So turn that upside down and figure out how that's going to go through the machine. And before you can do it, you have to clip the corner. Now, I will tell you, I made a big mistake here. That corner should be closer to 45 degrees. I made it more like 30, and that's going to be a problem later. Alright, so actually, here's where the problem happens. You should just be able to slide this into the roller to get it started, but my angle is off, so it's not quite working right, and it's going to take me a few tries to get it working right. I realized my angle's wrong, but I accidentally made it shallower. No, I should have made it sharper. But I left this in here so you can see that even as much as I have been doing this, I can still have problems. And I just thought about starting over, but no, one more time, using a little more coercion from my fingers. Okay, it is started. Lower the presser foot, lower the needle into it, presser foot, thread out of the way. Okay. Now, you can't just stomp the pedal and go, because you have to make sure that it is folded just so. And also, you cannot let your mind wander. If your mind wanders, the fabric wanders. And if it wanders too far off of where it's supposed to be, if it wanders too far in that direction, then it will not fold over twice like it should. It will only fold over once, and the hem will not be as nice, and it might be wavy. But if it wanders in that direction, then it will be folded over too many times, and it will just be a mangled mess that will be held in place with stitches. So you need to concentrate. I still need to concentrate now. I've also developed a technique of sort of pre-folding it before it gets into the rolled hem foot. So I hold it between my thumb and my first finger, and then put a little tension on it with some other fingers. And now we're ready to go. I hold the thread tails to get it started, and see, I'm holding my fingers to keep it pre-folded a little bit, and how much you fold it before it goes in is something you just have to get used to. And like I said, if I could not narrate this while I was sewing, because I would need to concentrate. But you see, we're almost to the end already, and it's going to get to a point there where my fingers aren't going to be able to hold it anymore. So you can just sew it and have it wander out, or I like to use a straight pin like this to hold it carefully in place as it finishes going through the rolled hem foot, which it has done. Take it out, cut the thread, and there's the back of it. Rolled twice, no raw edges visible, and then there's the front. So that is it for the rolled hem foot. Now it's time to move on to the ruffler. And as awkward as it feels to change things out, it's going to feel more awkward with this. But before I show you how to put it on, I'm going to take you through the main parts. The two parts that you can adjust on this. This is the tuck, so you have 1, 6, 12, and star. 1 means for every 1 stitch it will make a tuck. 6 is for every 6 stitches it makes a tuck. 12 is for every 12 stitches it makes a tuck. And star is no tucks at all. I leave it on 1. Okay, and then this is the doohickey that controls the depth of the tucks. Some rufflers have a lever that you move and then hold in place with the thumb screw, but this one is just the thumb screw. So the more you turn it and the deeper the tucks become. And I just kind of have an idea of how deep I need to make it. You can, of course, make a test if you want to. That's probably the rational thing to do, but since when have I done the rational thing? Alright, putting it on the machine. This little claw goes over sets the needle bar, and then the back goes on the regular bit that holds the presser foot, and it took me years to get used to the feeling of putting this on. So that can be the first frustration, is getting this thing on your machine being with. Now it does not matter if you put it through right side up or upside down, the skirt, the gathering part, but it does matter how you thread the fabric through. So it's going to go under this first bit, or over the first bit, sorry, under the second bit, and then over the third bit. These little fingers. And you can actually put in multiple pieces of cloth and have some not be ruffled and others be ruffled, and put in trim and have that on it. We're just doing the basic here. So you slide that through, get it started. And again, you do need to pay a little bit of attention to keep it from wandering. Oops. And I like to use my left hand to gently guide it through, because if you don't, sometimes the tucks sort of get piled up on themselves, and then you have a mess that you have to pull out and start over again. Alright, so away we go. And yeah, that's it. It's gathered. And for some reason my bobbin thread broke there. I don't know why, that doesn't usually happen, but there it is gathered. It's fairly even. It's not perfectly even because it did get a little caught up on itself a few times, and normally I would take it off now, but it's possible that this did not get gathered enough, so we're going to find that out. I'm going to take my waistband, and I apologize for putting it mostly out of shot here, and you see that the skirt is a little longer than the waistband, so you could take it out completely and gather it again, but it turns out that you can sometimes find one of your threads and to gently tug it to gather it on top of the ruffled tucks, a little more like traditional gathering, and just fine-tune the length. And is that it? That's pretty close. I want to pull it just a little bit more. Sorry, I'm doing this off frame. And finding my thread that I pulled a little before. And you see I'm also, distributing it throughout the entire length. And there. It is the correct length for the waistband. Now, if you're just making a dress for the dolls, I'm taking that off and putting my regular presser foot back on. If you're making a dress for dolls, then that's it. Your skirt is done. You could sew it onto the waistband. Now remember, I thread broke, so I have to take my bobbin out, fish the thread out, and get that back in place. Yes, I don't have a drop-in bobbin, and I've gotten used to this weird angle of a traditional bobbin. Just because I'm stubborn. Alright, straight stitch foot back on. Okay, and now I'm going to show you how I add the waistband to the skirt, although if you were just here for the ruffler and rolled hem foot, then you're done. You can turn it off, that's fine. Alright, so you find one edge that you want to be on top and fold that over to the inside. Alright, and I'm going to put a pin in it to hold that in place. And now you take the waistband, which you've already measured off what you need for your doll. Like I said, there's no measurements in this video because it's all about technique. And you put that waistband right side together on the top of the skirt and fold the same edge over that you just folded over on the skirt. pin that in place. And then you can just, probably without pinning, if you're careful, you could sew the waistband to the ruffled part of the skirt. But I have problems sometimes the bulk of the pleated tucked ruffle parts will shift, so I am going to quickly pin the waistband to the skirt. And it's just a little, you know, it got just a little large on that end because of the fold, so I just pull that in a little bit to snug it up. You know, I'm not super duper precise in most of my sewing, right? I've learned where I can be loose with doll clothes and not, okay. And it usually works out. Alright, now there is, you can stitch directly over the line of stitching from the tuck, or you can take it out later. I stitch roughly a 1/4 inch from the edge and take the tuck line out later. Back tack at the start. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when you're using the ruffler and the rolled hem foot, you can't back tack. And you see that I have the pins in. I don't sew over the pins exactly. I become aware of the pins and slow down when I get to each one, so I'm sewing past the pins. And that is sewn on. So now I have to take all the pins out. You don't need narration about taking the pins out. Okay. Pins are out. Waistband is sewn on. I forgot to snip some threads. And more threads. You know, okay, now flip the waistband up and you can see the threads from the stitching for the ruffling bit. I use a straight pin to pull that up. And then it should be loose enough that you can pull it out entirely. And then that side's out, so you can just take it, the now loose thread off the back. Hi. So, there it is ready. You are ready to finish the waistband. So you can, see, pull that up, leave that folded. And you can just fold this over once and sew through from the top so it catches the edge of the waistband. That you will have the raw edge exposed. So what I like to do is fold it over twice. Again, this might be more advanced or more fiddly, but as you can see with the bulk of the waistband, oh, my waistband is 1 inch wide, I did measure that. With the bulk of this, it's a little bit too bulky for it to fold over cleanly, so I trim away about half of the seam allowance on the waistband. And you know that is a perfectly viable thing to do with doll clothes. If you want smaller seam allowances, you sew your 1/4 inch seam allowances and then you trim them away to 1/8 inch when you're done. Of course, a 1/4 inch is about 6 millimeters. Alright, so fill in the thread. I fold this in half so the raw edge of the waistband meets the raw edge of the ruffled part of the skirt, and then fold that over again and carefully pin from the top through the edge, the folded edge on the back. Carefully. Alright, and now I'm going to pin a few more places, making sure it catches the very edge of the folded edge. And almost done with this pinning step. Alright, so we are ready to sew that. You will be sewing between the straight pin and the edge of the waistband. Now I put a straight pin in at a 90-degree angle to give me something to hold on to when it starts. Also, when you have fewer layers of cloth, putting it in at 90 degrees like that not only gives you something to hold on to, but it gives the whole thing an excuse not to get shoved down in the machine. And yes, I like to hold onto my thread tails, make sure they don't get slurped up by the take-up lever when I start. Alright, so again, back tack and sewing between where the straight pin is and the very edge of the waistband. This is called Stitch in the Ditch. Well, it's kind of Stitch in the Ditch. Stitch in the Ditch is a little more like when you have two halves of a spread out seam, but it's close enough to Stitch in a Ditch. And there is that. And I'm going to do my usual fiddling over sewing threads. I think I mentioned in the bag tutorial sewing video that I like to snip very close on the outside and then pull the thread tail through to the back. I think I did that. Fiddling with thread some more. Alright, and that's a little, I missed one edge there, but I'm gonna leave it. Alright, so now here is my hook and loop tape. You might notice a pencil line on it. That's because this started out as a 2 centimeter wide strip that I cut long ways. And to do that, I take my see-through ruler and draw lines 1/4 inch from each edge for a few feet at a time and then cut through there. You can also buy the lightweight, the soft Velcro brand hook and loop tape from like Joann, which comes at about 5/8 inch, and just cut that in half long ways. And that will give you a nice small strip of hook and loop tape, which I have pinned in place. And now I'm going to stitch from the back very close to the edge. Again, because I can use my straight stitch foot and line stuff up with the inside of the straight stitch foot to get close to the edge. And I leave again that straight pin in there so I have a handle, and I very slowly go past it so I'm not sewing into the straight pin. Back down the other side. Back tack. Okay, and that was the loop part, the soft part of hook and loop tape, which for whatever reason I decided I preferred that to be the half of the hook and loop tape that faces the doll. Here I am again cutting close and pulling the back to pull the thread tail through so it's not visible in the front. I think my theory with using the soft hook and loop tape on the top is that it will be less likely to be in contact with the doll knit clothes. And yes, I did not align it perfectly, so I just trimmed the misaligned edges off, and I am Butterfingers. And then that means I pin the hook part of the hook and loop tape face up on the bottom opening edge. Sew that in place. Once again, leaving the straight pin in at the top to act as a handle to help me turn the corner and hold on to it and keep it from, if it were lighter weight, getting shoved down into the sewing machine. And back down the other long edge, eventually. Okay, now I don't usually deal with cutting close and pulling through on this because this part is never going to be seen. So we are almost finished. Again, cutting off the little bits that didn't quite line up. Just make sure not to cut through your stitching. Being fiddly. Okay, now we just have the back seam. Align the rolled hem edges. Now they are a little bulky, so definitely pin these in place to keep them from shifting when they go under the presser foot. And then thread. I like to put another straight pin at the top where I need to stop stitching, just because that helps hold things flat when I'm sewing. Alright, so again, hold on, you can use that, yes, center back seam. You can use that straight pin in there as a sort of handle and go carefully so you sew past it and not over it. And I'm going to leave that in place while I sew the rest of this seam. Take that one out. Back tack. And almost finished. But there is one more step before you turn it right side out. So I'm clipping off my thread tails. And then you take this little bit of seam allowance at the very bottom, starting near the stitching you just did, cut at an angle up, And that way it is not going to stick out and be visible from the outside. Okay, turn it right side out. I don't know why I turned it out through the waistband. It would have been easier to turn out through the hem, but that's what I did, and now it's done. Ta-da! Here is a gymnast Barbie body. I left enough room in the waistband to tuck the shirt in, and here she is. She's done. Thanks for watching.